The first time Olivia saw the house, it looked more abandoned than lived in. She had been driving through a quiet back road in northern Maine, the kind of place where the trees grow so thick they feel like a wall pressing in on both sides. Her phone had lost service miles back, and the GPS had given up before that. It was late in the afternoon, with a pale sun fighting through heavy gray clouds, and she had pulled over to stretch her legs. The house sat at the end of a narrow gravel path, half hidden by overgrown weeds. Its wooden siding had faded to a sickly gray, the windows either dark or shuttered, and the roof sagged slightly in the middle like a tired old man. Yet, despite its condition, something about it seemed watchful, as if it knew she had stopped to look at it. She told herself it was just curiosity that made her walk closer. Maybe it had once been a boarding house or a family's summer retreat left to rot in the woods. She noted how silent everything was. No birds, no breeze, not even the hum of distant traffic. The quiet pressed into her ears until she could hear the faint crunch of her own shoes on the gravel. A shiver ran up her spine, though the air wasn't particularly cold. When she reached the front gate, a rusted iron arch nearly swallowed by vines, she stopped. The gate was open, hanging loosely on its hinges, and beyond it the path wound up to a porch that sagged under the weight of moss. She hadn't meant to come this far, but there she was, staring up at the house as if waiting for it to notice her that a sound came from inside. It was faint, muffled, but unmistakable, a soft creak like footsteps on an old staircase. Olivia froze. It was impossible, she thought. No one could be living here. But the sound came again, a groan of wood under shifting weight. She peered through the shadowy windows but saw nothing except the warped reflection of herself standing in the fading light. A logical voice in her head whispered, "An animal, maybe, a raccoon or a fox." Yet her chest tightened, and she felt the prickle of being watched from behind the glass. She pulled her jacket tighter and glanced back at her car, half hidden by the curve of the road. Going back suddenly seemed very wise, but the strangest thing happened when she turned to leave. From the corner of her eye, she saw the front door move, just slightly, enough that she knew it hadn't been the wind. The door had opened an inch, the darkness inside yawning wider. Her pulse skipped, and her throat went dry. She didn't move, didn't breathe, until the door eased back into place as though nothing had disturbed it at all. Olivia stood there, gripping the straps of her bag, trying to decide if she had imagined the entire thing. But when she glanced down at the gate again, her heart stuttered. The iron gate, which had been sagging open when she arrived, was now shut. She backed away slowly, refusing to turn her back on the house. Step by step, she made her way to her car, fumbling for her keys with trembling fingers. Her eyes never left the porch, the dark windows, the silent door. By the time she got behind the wheel and locked it, her breathing had quickened into short, sharp gasps. The house sat in the dimming light, unchanged, silent, as if mocking her fear. She told herself again and again that she had only imagined the movement, the sound, the gate. But when she finally drove off, gravel spitting from her tires, she couldn't shake the image of the house watching her retreat. And even stranger, she swore she saw the faint flicker of a light come on in an upstairs window as she rounded the bend and lost sight of it. Olivia drove for nearly an hour before she felt her heartbeat return to something resembling normal. The road wound through miles of empty forest, and as the daylight waned, her headlights carved pale tunnels between the trees. She tried to laugh at herself. Really, she had been spooked by an old house. People abandoned buildings all the time. The footsteps, the door moving, even the gate. Her mind had exaggerated it. She told herself the brain sometimes stitched illusions together when it wanted to see patterns. Still, each time she checked her rearview mirror, she half expected to see headlights following her, or worse, a shadowy figure in the back seat. The seat was empty, of course, but she couldn't shake the feeling of being accompanied. She finally pulled into the small town of Ashwick just as the last orange traces of daylight gave way to night. The town was quiet, with only a single diner glowing neon red on the corner. Her body ached from the tension of driving, and though she wanted to get back on the highway, she decided she needed to rest. Inside the diner, the atmosphere was warm and greasy, filled with the scent of fried potatoes and coffee. A waitress with tired eyes and a kind smile brought her a menu. Olivia glanced around at the handful of locals sitting in silence, most of them staring into their plates. When the waitress asked where she was headed, Olivia casually mentioned she had gotten lost on a back road and had come across a strange, abandoned house. The change in the woman's face was immediate. Her smile faded into something smaller, more guarded. She didn't respond right away, just shifted her weight and looked toward the back of the diner where a man in a flannel shirt sat at the counter. Olivia noticed that even he had stopped eating, though he pretended not to be listening. The waitress finally spoke, her voice lowered. "You didn't go near it, did you?" Olivia blinked, caught off guard, and admitted she hadn't gone inside. The waitress nodded slightly, as if relieved, but her eyes still carried a wary edge. "Best stay away from that place," she said. "Folks round here know better than to linger." Something about her tone tightened the unease in Olivia's stomach. She wanted to ask more, but the atmosphere in the diner had shifted. The locals avoided her gaze now, and even the man in the flannel returned his attention to his plate with exaggerated disinterest. She finished her meal quickly, the food turning tasteless in her mouth. Outside, the night was thick and cool, and for the first time, Olivia wondered if she had stumbled into more than just an abandoned property. She checked into a modest roadside motel across the street, telling herself she'd leave early in the morning and never think of the house again. But sleep didn't come easily. The room smelled faintly of mildew, and the walls seemed too thin, letting in the hum of a vending machine outside and the occasional groan of pipes. Olivia tossed and turned, replaying the sight of that upstairs light flickering to life. When she finally drifted into uneasy dreams, she dreamed of the house, its windows glowing like eyes, its doors slowly swinging open. In her dream, she stood frozen at the gate, unable to move while something inside the house shifted closer, closer, until she could hear it breathing. She woke before dawn, drenched in sweat, the echo of that sound still lingering in her ears. Olivia woke before sunrise, still shaken from the dream. The room's thin curtains let in a faint gray light, and the world outside seemed strangely muffled, as if even the motel was holding its breath. She splashed water on her face in the cramped bathroom and stared at her reflection, trying to convince herself she wasn't unraveling. But then she remembered the waitress's reaction the night before. The look in her eyes hadn't been amusement or dismissal, it had been fear. People in that town knew something about the house, and Olivia felt a gnawing pull in her chest. Logic told her to check out, get on the highway, and put this all behind her. Yet, another part of her, the restless, searching part, whispered that leaving without understanding would be worse than facing whatever truth lay waiting. She checked out of the motel just after dawn. The clerk barely looked at her when she handed over the key, muttering a distracted, "Safe travels." As she loaded her bag into the car, she noticed the same man from the diner the night before, the one in the flannel shirt, standing across the street. He wasn't doing anything, just leaning against a lamppost with a paper cup of coffee in his hand. His eyes followed her, though he made no effort to speak. When she finally drove off, his gaze lingered in the mirror until the bend in the road swallowed him from sight. The unease that had kept her awake all night returned with double strength, crawling along her skin like static. The sensible route would have been to drive south toward the interstate. Instead, she found herself steering back toward the same back road she had traveled the day before. She told herself she was only curious, that she wouldn't get too close. Maybe she'd just look again in the morning light, see if the house seemed as sinister in the sun as it had at dusk. But the road felt longer this time, the forest pressing closer. The pines rose like blackened spires, their branches weaving overhead until even daylight seemed dim. When she finally saw the gravel path cutting into the trees, her stomach clenched. The house was there, waiting, as though it had never once been absent from her mind. She parked at the bend of the road and stood for a long moment, just staring. In daylight, the house was even more decrepit, the wood warped and stained, one shutter hanging crooked. But what unsettled her most was the silence. No birds, no rustle of wind through the leaves, nothing. It was as if the forest itself avoided the place. She walked cautiously toward the iron gate, half expecting it to be open again. But it was closed, firmly this time, and as she reached out, her hand trembled. The metal was cold, far colder than the air around her. She lingered there, her palm resting on the gate, when she heard it, a voice. Soft, so soft it might have been mistaken for breath, drifting from the house. It wasn't a word she could understand, but it carried a rhythm, a low whisper that slid under her skin that Olivia's throat tightened. She spun around, scanning the trees, the path, her car in the distance. But the whisper came again, clearer now, from the upstairs window where she had seen the light the night before. Her legs went rigid, every nerve screaming at her to run, but her body refused to obey. She stood rooted to the spot, hands still against the cold iron gate, as though the house itself had fastened her in place. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the whisper stopped. The silence that followed was somehow worse, deeper, heavier. Olivia staggered back, breaking contact with the gate, and stumbled toward her car. She didn't look back this time, not even when she thought she heard the faintest echo of the gate creaking open behind her. Olivia drove until the forest thinned and the road met a fork leading back into town. Her hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel, her pulse hammering in her ears. She wanted to convince herself the whisper had been her imagination, some trick of the wind threading through the decayed wood of the house. But no matter how she tried, she couldn't replicate in her mind the distinct, deliberate tone of that sound. It had been a voice, and though the words had been impossible to decipher, their intent had been sharp and personal, directed at her. The further she drove from the house, the more the forest seemed to ease, sound trickling back in the form of birdsong and rustling leaves. Only then did she realize how suffocating the silence had truly been. By the time she returned to Ashwick, the sun was higher, washing the town in a dull, gray brightness. She parked near the diner, half hoping the waitress from the night before would be working again. Sure enough, the same woman was behind the counter, pouring coffee into chipped mugs. Olivia hesitated before going in, bracing herself. The bell above the door chimed, and the waitress glanced up, her smile faltering when she recognized Olivia. She poured another coffee and carried it over without asking. "You went back, didn't you?" she said flatly. Olivia froze. She hadn't mentioned anything yet. Somehow, the woman already knew. The waitress slid into the booth across from her, keeping her voice low. "People around here don't talk about that house, not unless they have to. Some say it's cursed, others say it's something worse. But everyone agrees it pulls people in, like it doesn't want to be forgotten." Olivia listened, her skin prickling. She wanted to press for details, but the waitress shook her head quickly. "Don't ask me more. I won't say it. The less spoken, the better." Her eyes darted to the window, toward the line of trees on the horizon. "If you're smart, you'll leave. Tonight, before it gets dark again." The weight in her tone silenced Olivia's questions. She sat there staring into the bitter black coffee, fighting the urge to push for answers. There was something about the town's collective silence that frightened her more than the house itself. It meant there was history, a truth known by many but carried like a secret too dangerous to say aloud. When Olivia finally left the diner, she saw the man in the flannel again, lingering across the street. This time he didn't try to hide that he was watching her. He raised his coffee cup in a kind of grim salute, then turned and walked down the street, disappearing into the crowd of morning shoppers. That night, Olivia checked into the motel again, though she told herself it would be the last time. Her bag stayed packed by the door, ready for a quick departure at dawn. She tried reading, then scrolling through the few offline files she had on her phone, but nothing quieted her restless thoughts. Sleep eventually came, but with it came another dream, or something worse. She dreamed of lying in her motel bed, the room dark except for the glow of the vending machine outside. But in the dream, the machine flickered and went out, leaving her in silence. Then, from the corner of the room, she heard that whisper again, closer this time, curling into her ear. She woke with a cry, heart pounding, only to find the vending machine light outside was indeed dark. The hum of its motor had stopped completely. Olivia spent most of the next day trying to ignore the pull of the house. She walked the main street of Ashwick, browsed the shelves of the town's small bookstore, and sat by the empty fountain in the square with a sandwich she barely tasted. Normalcy surrounded her, yet none of it seemed to stick. Every face she passed carried that same wariness, that same studied silence. Even when she asked casual questions about the forest, about the older parts of town, people would politely answer but quickly steer away from certain topics. It was as though the house was a wound the town had agreed never to touch. By mid-afternoon, She realized she was simply waiting. Waiting for the sun to dip low enough that returning to the house would feel inevitable. The drive back into the forest felt different this time. No longer was she wandering by accident. Now she was making a choice. Her stomach twisted with dread, but there was also a strange clarity, as if some quiet understanding had settled inside her. She had to go back. She had to see it up close, even if just to prove to herself that the whispers and dreams had no real power. The sky was heavy with clouds, bruised shades of purple and gray, and the gravel path appeared almost before she expected it, drawing her car to a stop. The iron gate was shut once again, waiting. The house loomed behind it, its broken shutters flapping softly in the windless air. She left the engine running at first, as though she might change her mind, then killed it and slipped the keys into her jacket pocket. Gravel crunched underfoot as she approached the gate, and this time she didn't hesitate. Her hand pressed against the iron, the unnatural chill spreading into her skin. The latch gave easily, too easily, swinging open with a groan that echoed far too loud for such a still place. The air inside the yard was heavier, damp with a smell like rotting leaves and wet wood. Each step up the path seemed to take twice as long as it should, until she reached the sagging porch. The boards groaned under her weight, and she found herself staring at the door, the same one that had opened, then closed, of its own accord. Her fingers brushed the doorknob. It was slick with moisture, colder than the gate had been. For a long moment, Olivia closed her eyes, telling herself this was foolish, dangerous, something no rational person would do. But behind that reasoning was another thought, insistent and impossible to ignore. You were meant to come here. The words didn't feel like hers, yet they burned in her chest like a truth she'd always known. With a trembling breath, she pushed the door open. The sound was unbearable, a long, hollow creak that seemed to shake the very air. Inside, the darkness breathed out at her, thick with dust and something older, something metallic. She stepped inside. The floor was uneven, warped under her boots. The air smelled of mold, iron, and faintly, smoke, though no fire had touched the house in decades, judging by the peeling wallpaper and cobweb-draped corners. Light filtered weakly through dirty windows, painting pale stripes across the entryway. A grand staircase rose directly ahead, its banister carved with intricate patterns now eroded by time. To the left, a parlor sagged beneath a collapsed ceiling, while to the right, a hallway stretched into shadow. The silence was complete, suffocating. Olivia stood in the threshold, her heart pounding, waiting for something, a sound, a movement, a whisper. But nothing came, and somehow, that emptiness was worse than anything she had imagined. Olivia lingered in the entryway longer than she intended, her breath shallow as her eyes adjusted to the dimness. The silence had a weight to it, pressing against her ears until she could hear the faint thrum of her own pulse. She told herself she would take just a quick look, one room, maybe two, and then leave. That would be enough to prove that the house was only a house, that its menace lived only in her imagination. With that shaky logic holding her steady, she turned toward the parlor on the left, stepping over a fallen beam that had split across the floor like a bone. The parlor was a ruin. Wallpaper peeled in long, curling strips, revealing cracked plaster beneath. A grand fireplace yawned black at the far wall, filled not with ash but with a strange, fine dust that glittered faintly when the light caught it. A chandelier lay collapsed in the corner, its glass prisms shattered across the warped floorboards like teeth. Olivia crouched, running her fingers lightly over the fragments. They were coated in the same fine dust, and when she rubbed it between her fingers, it left a faint metallic sheen. The smell in here was stronger, that metallic tang, sharp and sour, the scent of rust or blood. She stood quickly, heart thudding, and backed away toward the hallway. The right-hand corridor stretched deeper than she expected, its walls lined with crooked frames. She paused to look at them, expecting family portraits, but most were empty, the glass cracked or missing entirely. Only one remained intact, a sepia photograph of a stern-looking man in a dark suit, standing on the porch of the very same house. His eyes seemed to follow her, unblinking, and the longer she looked, the more the expression seemed to shift. A flicker of disdain, perhaps, or warning. Olivia forced herself to look away, moving deeper down the hall where doors lined either side. Each knob she tried resisted, stuck fast, as if the house itself denied her entry. Finally, one door gave way with a reluctant groan. Inside was a study, surprisingly intact compared to the ruin she'd seen elsewhere. Bookshelves sagged under the weight of mold-eaten tomes, and a heavy desk dominated the center of the room. The dust here was thick, but the chair behind the desk had been pulled back, as though someone had only just risen from it. Olivia's skin prickled. On the desk lay a notebook, its cover cracked with age. Against every instinct, she reached out and flipped it open. The pages were filled with cramped handwriting. The ink faded to a sickly brown. She scanned the first few lines. It speaks at night. At first in whispers, then clearer. I fear it knows me now. I fear it wants more. Her fingers trembled as she turned the page, but before she could read further, a sound rose through the house. Soft at first, so soft she thought she imagined it. A long, steady inhale. Then an exhale, deep and rattling, as though the walls themselves were lungs. The floor shivered beneath her feet, the dust rippling across the desk as if disturbed by unseen breath. Olivia froze, clutching the notebook to her chest. The house wasn't silent anymore. The house was breathing. The sound of the house breathing lingered long after it should have ended, rattling in Olivia's chest like an echo that didn't belong to her. She gripped the notebook tighter, scanning the study for movement, her body frozen between the instinct to flee and the compulsion to see more. The shelves groaned softly, wood creaking as though bending beneath a weight that wasn't there. She told herself it was old timber, just settling. But the exhale came again, unmistakable this time, deeper, louder, and the dust along the floorboards rippled outward in slow waves, as though stirred by lungs the size of the house itself. A sharp crack split the silence. One of the books flew from the shelf, landing open on the floor. Olivia jumped, her pulse surging into her throat. She stared at the fallen book, its pages splayed wide, and realized it hadn't fallen at all. The shelves had been still, unmoving, until the book hurled itself outward as though it had been thrown. Her legs threatened to give out, but she forced herself to kneel, eyes locked on the ink-scrawled words smeared across the yellowed page. The handwriting matched the notebook she clutched. It wants me below. It calls to me. I cannot ignore it anymore. The words blurred as her vision shook. Something shifted in the corner of the study. Not a shadow, not a trick of the dim light. Something darker, deeper, detaching itself from the wall. Olivia staggered back, her heel striking the desk with a dull thud. The shape was vaguely human, tall, thin, its edges dissolving into tendrils of smoke that writhed and curled. For one agonizing moment, she thought it would advance toward her. But instead, it sank downward, dissolving into the floorboards with a sound like a sigh. The wood shuddered beneath the spot it vanished, the dust spiraling down as if pulled into hidden cracks. Olivia's mind screamed basement. Her breath came in ragged bursts now. She turned toward the door, clutching the notebook like a lifeline, and stumbled back into the hallway. The air there was heavier, the silence now charged with a living presence. Every portrait along the wall seemed to glare more harshly, their faded faces twisting in the corners of her eyes. She moved quickly, nearly running, until she found herself back at the base of the grand staircase. The choice loomed before her, the yawning shadows above, or the unknown darkness below. Somewhere in the house, a floorboard groaned, deliberate, like a step. Then she heard it, clearer than before, without the muffled distortion of dreams or distance. A whisper, curling down the staircase, smooth as silk and cold as ice. Come down. Olivia's body moved before her mind could argue. The whisper had coiled itself into her veins, dragging her toward the back of the house, where she'd glimpsed a door half hidden in shadow. Each step was heavy, her boots sticking slightly to the warped boards as though the house didn't want to let her go, yet pushed her onward at the same time. She gripped the notebook so tightly that the leather cover dug into her palm. At the end of the hallway, beneath the curve of the staircase, she found it, a squat wooden door, its surface swollen from damp, its handle crusted with rust. The smell that leaked from the cracks was stronger here, metallic, sour, like iron left to rot in water. The knob resisted at first, but with a sharp twist it gave way, and the door groaned open. A breath of air rose up to meet her, colder, denser, and undeniably alive. A narrow staircase descended into the dark, its boards warped and bowed, each step leading into a blackness that swallowed the weak light spilling from the entryway. Olivia hesitated, her throat tightening, every nerve screaming at her to turn back. But then the whisper rose again, drifting upward from the abyss. "Come down." It was louder this time, more insistent, and against her will she obeyed. The descent was agonizing. Each step shrieked beneath her weight, the wood threatening to crumble. The air thickened, damp with mold and the coppery tang of rust. Her hand brushed against the wall, slick with moisture, and she jerked away, wiping her palm against her jacket. Halfway down, the light from above failed entirely. She pulled out her phone, its dim glow illuminating only a few feet ahead. The walls here were stone, rough and damp, and the smell was overpowering. She felt less like she was entering a basement and more like she was sinking into the lungs of something ancient, the bottom. The stairs gave way to packed earth. The phone's glow revealed a low, arched ceiling and the outline of the room. A cellar, but wider than the house itself, impossibly so. Shapes filled the space. Broken furniture, rotting crates, and in the center, a circle of stones blackened with soot. Olivia's chest tightened. She crouched near it, brushing away dust, and found symbols carved into the rock, etched deep by a hand desperate enough to leave its mark. The symbols were crude but deliberate, spiraling inward like a trap. And at the center lay something that made her stomach twist, a pile of ash, gray and fine, still faintly warm to the touch. The whisper returned, but this time it wasn't distant. It was inside the room with her, seeping from every corner, threading into her ears, her blood, her breath. She lifted her phone higher, her trembling hand revealing the far wall. There, etched deep into the damp stone, were more words. Not scribbled like the notebook, but carved, each letter jagged. "IT lives below." The whisper rose sharply, almost a hiss, and for the first time Olivia realized it wasn't calling her downward anymore. It was warning her. The floor beneath her boots trembled, faint but undeniable, as though something vast and unseen shifted in the soil below. The trembling under Olivia's boots deepened into a steady thrum, like the pulse of something enormous buried just beneath the earth. She stumbled backward from the carved wall, the words "IT lives below" burning into her mind. Her phone's weak glow flickered, the screen dimming though the battery had been full. The whisper that had guided her down was gone, replaced by something heavier, a silence so thick it felt alive. She turned toward the stairs, ready to flee, but the soil at the center of the circle stirred. The ash shifted, rising as though pulled by invisible fingers, spiraling into the air. She froze, rooted by terror as the ash began to shape itself. A form emerged from the circle, tall, impossibly thin, its limbs stretching too long for any human. The dust clung to its shape, giving it a gray, skeletal outline. Where its face should have been, there was only a hollow void, darker than the cellar's shadows, a hole that seemed to drink in the light. The air grew colder with every second, and Olivia's lungs burned as though the oxygen had been stolen. Then it moved. The figure bent unnaturally, joints cracking like breaking branches, and its faceless head turned toward her. Her phone slipped from her hand, clattering to the floor. The dim light tilted upward, catching the thing's torso, where faint carvings marked its skin, spirals and jagged symbols etched, as though the stone circle itself had branded it. The sight drove a needle of dread through her chest. The notebook's words returned in her mind. "It knows me now. It wants more." The figure took a step, the earth sagging under its weight, though its body seemed insubstantial, made of smoke and bone. Olivia's legs finally obeyed her fear. She bolted for the stairs, breath ragged, heart hammering, the notebook still clutched in one hand. Behind her, the sound came. Not a whisper this time, but a voice, vast and cavernous, as though spoken by the earth itself. "You cannot leave." The stairwell groaned as if buckling beneath her, dust falling from the ceiling. She climbed, faster than she thought possible, her body scraping against the damp walls. Something clawed at the air behind her, not touching, but pulling, dragging her backward with an unseen force. Her fingers burned as she clung to the stair rail, hauling herself upward one agonizing step at a time. The voice thundered again, shaking the walls. "You belong below." With a final desperate push, She burst through the basement door and slammed it shut behind her. She collapsed against it, chest heaving, every muscle trembling. The silence upstairs was absolute, as if the house itself was listening. The doorknob beneath her shoulder rattled once, twice, then fell still. Olivia pressed her forehead against the wood, tears burning her eyes. She had seen it. She had heard it. And though she had escaped the cellar, she knew the house hadn't let her go. Not yet. Olivia didn't remember standing. One moment she was slumped against the basement door, lungs burning. The next she was running through the hall, past the parlor, past the crooked portraits whose faces now seemed to leer with cruel satisfaction. The house groaned around her with every step, the sound of wood and stone flexing as if in pain. She reached the front door and yanked it open, stumbling out onto the sagging porch. For a heartbeat, she thought the forest had shifted, the trees leaned closer, the air colder, the gravel path stretching longer than before. But adrenaline surged, and she sprinted toward her car, gravel crunching like bones under her boots. She flung herself inside, slamming the locks down with shaking hands. The keys slipped twice before she jammed them into the ignition. The engine roared to life, headlights cutting through the gray. Behind her, the house loomed, larger than it had been, its windows burning faintly with pale light. For the first time, she thought she saw shapes moving inside, tall figures drifting past the glass. The whisper rose again, carried on no wind but threading into her mind, soft and insistent. Below. She threw the car into gear and sped down the road, tires spitting gravel as if trying to erase her presence. The forest blurred past in a tunnel of black and green. Her hands clenched the wheel so tightly her knuckles ached. She didn't dare look in the rearview mirror, terrified she'd see the house following, or worse, sitting calmly in the back seat. Only when she burst into the open stretch near Ashwick did she allow herself to breathe. She drove through the town without stopping, ignoring the stares of those who seemed to know where she had been. By the time she reached the highway, tears streaked her face. Relief mingled with terror. She was out. She had escaped. But escape was not the same as freedom. That night, in a motel miles away, she showered and scrubbed at her skin until it was raw, trying to wash off the smell of damp stone and ash. When she finally collapsed into bed, exhaustion dragged her into sleep almost instantly. She dreamed of the basement again, the circle of stones, the hollow figure rising. But this time, she wasn't standing at the edge. She was inside the circle. The earth trembled beneath her, the ash clinging to her skin like a second layer. And when she woke, heart racing, she found the notebook lying open on the nightstand, though she was certain she had left it zipped inside her bag. The words on the newest page were written in fresh ink. "It knows me now. It wants more." Olivia stared at the writing, her breath caught in her throat. Slowly, she raised her hand and turned it palm up. Faint, spiraling marks, gray and dust-like, were etched into her skin where none had been before, curling inward like the carvings on the stones. Her stomach twisted with a sick realization. She hadn't left the house behind. It had followed her, carved its claim into her flesh, and it would not stop until she returned. Somewhere, in the silence of her motel room, the whisper rose again, closer than ever, curling just behind her ear. "Come back below."